Strange things go on in the night. Past gets mixed with future. Problems vie with solutions. The brain goes its own way. Almost unnoticed, the brain performs massive feats while we sleep. Professor Jan Born is a sleep researcher in Lübeck.
What we know is that when we take in information, for example, when we apply our mind to a problem before going to sleep, the brain addresses the problem again in the sleep that follows. Basically speaking, the neuronal networks that were activated when the information was received are reactivated in sleep.
That was brought to light by an experiment. What is the system behind the row of numbers on the screen? The test subject considered the question before and after sleep, but his brain must have worked on the answer during the hours in between, because, like most other test subjects, he recognized the pattern when he woke up. Subjects who hadn't slept in between did significantly worse. The brain, the control center of our body, never rests. It processes the old, thinks about the new, feels pain and joy, and learns from everything. It's genetically programmed for lifelong learning. Everything we do is controlled by 20 billion nerve cells in the brain. Each one is connected with thousands of others, transmitting and receiving impulses across junctions known as synapses. When we learn, the number and efficiency of the links between cells increase. Cells also communicate at night, although in a different way during dream sleep than in delta or deep sleep.
Delta sleep is particularly good for declarative memory, which is the aspect of memory that enables us to learn vocabulary or to re-experience past events in our mind's eye. That is declarative memory, and it evidently profits a great deal more from delta sleep than from REM or dream sleep. On the other hand, REM sleep seems to be important for procedural memory, which applies to skills such as playing tennis, or skiing, or typing. Memory of skills and procedures profits mainly from REM sleep.
The brain disengages with consciousness night after night and learns what it likes. Those who need to learn a great deal dream of being able to make use of this time. Can't the brain be outwitted? Can't its nightly wanderings be controlled? Can't the brain be told what to learn?
Sleep can be manipulated by taking account of sleep phases, by timing the learning process or problem-solving process to occur shortly before a sleeping phase, and then making sure we get a good long sleep. We know that Einstein slept more than most. Perhaps that's one of the reasons he came up with such brilliant ideas.
She is a little genius. Like all infants, the receptive capacity of the brain is greatest in the first few months of life, and that is essential. Infants are exposed to a deluge of sensory impressions. They have to work out what language is, how to use hands and feet, what's going on around them, and who they are themselves. That's a massive task for nerve cells. Every new impression makes a mark, but parents needn't worry about overtaxing their pace of learning themselves. The brain works tirelessly and decides for itself what it learns. Brain researcher Manfred Spitzer in Ulm has studied the system on which the learning process is based.
We have two systems built into our brain. One tells us what is difficult and dangerous, and what's dangerous for us is something we don't want to repeat. That's why we learn very quickly not to put our hand on a hot cooker ring. We may do it once, but never again, because we learn that it's not good for us. That is the one system which is responsible for negative emotions and learning from negative experiences. But we have another system, one that is responsible for positive things, and tells us when something was better than expected. When that happens, this second system kicks in and makes sure we learn the lesson.
Und das sorgt auch dafür, dass besser gelernt wird.
The brain rewards itself when it accomplishes a task. It releases a hormone called dopamine. A sense of satisfaction spreads through the body. For someone learning, this reward from within is often more effective than praise from outside. It affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls thought and action. The dopamine rush makes us want to keep on making new discoveries and keeps us alert to the world around us. The brain drives us to acquire knowledge, an ingenious device of nature. Brain researcher Professor Spitzer.
The same positive system that encourages us to learn makes us curious and ensures that we explore areas where we don't know very much and can therefore learn. That's the thing about learning. You have to be in a place where you can learn something. If you always focus on areas where you know everything, there is nothing to learn. But we have this built-in system which makes sure that when we know everything, we get bored and automatically turn to areas where we don't know everything.
Brain research also tries to get answers from those who can't give any themselves. The eyes play a key role in gathering information. Children see the world in a very different way from adults. That has been established by Professor Ruxandra Siritianu at the Max Planck Institute of Brain Research in Frankfurt.
Their visual acuity is a 50th of the visual acuity of an adult. Their field of vision is reduced. They have tunnel vision, extending only about 45 degrees on either side. The fields of vision of the two eyes don't yet overlap. That takes several months to develop. So it is not surprising that there are a great number of things children can't do, but it's important to identify exactly what they can't do.
Es ist aber wichtig zu wissen, exakt, was sie nicht können. So, jetzt kommt die Karte. Hallo.
For example, they can't do this. Recognize that one shape on the board is different from the others. Their eye doesn't pick it out.
Mal. So, ja. Gut. Und die letzte. Kommt die letzte. Nochmal. Ja, schön. Und auch die nochmal. So. Ja.
A surprise for researchers. But why do the little geniuses fail in this simple experiment?
The explanation, or rather the hypothesis, is that infants come into the world with a genetic instruction to look out for repetition in their environment. In this case, to pay attention to visual stimuli which appear in multiples, stimuli which are repeated and together form a structure, and to disregard any element that differs.
Ein Gebilde darstellen und nicht auf das abweichende Element.
What we assume is that a child first needs to learn about repetition before it can identify deviation.
Und das Abweichende beachten kann.
Das Gehirn merkt sich das, was immer wieder
The
passiert.
brain notices anything that happens repeatedly, which is brilliant, of course, because there is no need to take note of yesterday's coincidences. Tomorrow's will be different. But if something will be the same as it was yesterday, that is, if there are rules that affect me or regular things happening around me, it naturally makes very good sense for my brain to take note not of the individual episodes, but of the rules governing them. Because the rules stay the same. So it's more efficient and more sensible to note the rules and not the episodes. If I know only 100 episodes, I won't be equipped to cope in the future, because I won't know how to interpret what happens tomorrow.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes from all.
But sometimes the brain doesn't need any rules.
Gemerkt werden können
Individual episodes can also be noted. Where were you at 3:30 in the afternoon of the 11th of September 2001? Everybody knows that. But no one knows where they were on the 11th of September this year or last year, even though it's not so long ago. Why? Because at 3:30 on the 11th of September 2001, something happened that shocked us. And for things that shock us, whether they are positive or negative, things that evoke an emotional response, we have extra systems built into our brain which ensure that individual episodes are immediately noted, without the need for them to be repeated.
Sofort gemerkt werden und keine vielen Wiederholungen brauchen.
We are a product of our genes, but upbringing also plays a significant role. Parents provide experience that helps children discover their own gifts and aptitudes, and the brain directs the process. If we find something fun, the brain keeps on thinking about it.
There is no such thing as an optimal environment for everyone. People spend their lives searching for the environment that best suits their aptitudes. It used to be thought that we come into the world with a certain genetic makeup and are molded by the environment, and thus become a product of that environment. But that is wrong. Our genes are with us all our life, and they become increasingly influential. We are not shaped by our environment. Our genes steer us through life towards the environment that suits them best. If we look at a person's life as a whole, we find that, if anything, genetic makeup plays a growing role in the course of that life, not a diminishing one.
Even so, a youngster needs stimulation, and a great deal can go wrong there, not just for these rodents. This juvenile has been separated from its parents since birth as part of an experiment, 3 times a day for an hour at a time. The young animal experiences loneliness and stress. It doesn't know what's happening. The effects can be seen in the brain. Developmental biologist Professor Katharina Braun.
To take the analogy of a computer, we format the brain and its networks in early childhood, and that, as it were, is the hard disk available for learning as an adult later. I can still tweak the circuits a bit, but the basic wiring is established in early childhood. So, you can imagine that if an animal is exposed to conditions which promote subnormal brain activity for a long time while the brain is growing, the development of nerve cells and synaptic connections in the brain will differ from that in an animal that grows up with strong or normal brain activity.
Welches mit einer sehr starken oder normalen Aktivität im Gehirn aufwächst.
If the brain is not stimulated in childhood, scientists believe it eventually loses the drive to learn. The brain gets the dopamine rush from successfully avoiding challenges. So, parents make a big difference simply by being present and interacting with the child.
If animals or people suffer prolonged exposure to negative environmental conditions during childhood, i.e., if they are deprived of parental care, kept in an unstimulating environment, etc., the underactivity in the brain becomes chronic. We have seen this in children who grow up without parents. And if that underactivity becomes chronic, there is a good chance that the children are going to have not only learning difficulties, but also psychological problems. Psychological problems are very closely connected with learning achievement. So by exposing the brain to this early stress, you can actually train it, as it were, to shut down certain circuits permanently.
Nicht mehr aktivierbar zu sein.
Fear and too much stress are impediments to learning, not only for animals, as Professor Manfred Spitzer explains.
If we learn in fear and terror, we learn fear and terror themselves. So when we retrieve what we have learned later, we retrieve fear and terror with it. And we now know that fear and creativity do not go well together. Which means that if irony, cynicism, sarcasm and a negative atmosphere prevail in the classroom, we may still learn the lesson, but what we learn will not be useful for solving a problem in 30 years' time, because the fear associated with the memory will interfere with the problem-solving process.
Und damit das Problem lösen, das Kreative nicht mehr geht.
Making the brain controllable, making it possible for people to push aside feelings like fear, that is part of the focus of the scientists' work in Ulm. The young man going into the MRI scanner is a student facing important exams. He's here to learn to handle pre-exam nerves. In the course of this months-long study, the scientists have been monitoring his performance. Cheating won't work. They are looking into his brain. The student practices switching back and forth between emotional tension and relaxation. In the MRI tube, he's presented with a string of emotive words and tries to use reason to lessen the negative emotional response. The point of the exercise is to get the prefrontal cortex, the cognitive control center of the brain, to get the upper hand over the amygdala, the groups of neurons that govern emotional reactions. Dr. Andrea Horn is a neurologist.
If you can show people how to exercise the mental control needed to handle an emotional trigger, in this case a word, and to wind down their emotions, you are effectively training people to cope better with situations which they previously found very difficult and frightening.
Das würde bedeuten, dass man eben, wenn man Menschen gezielt trainiert in diesem Bereich, dass sie eben auch mit Situationen.
And once they can do that, they can also create a better personal context for learning.
Einen günstigeren Kontext für sich selber schaffen können, um besser zu lernen.
The younger the brain, the greater the chance of outwitting it. Therapies are being developed to cure tendencies which make life difficult for even the brightest child. One study is looking at perception deficits which could cause dyslexia. The television is on only as a distraction. The brain pays attention to sounds. The researchers' aim is to stop the zigzagging nerve cells and one day make dyslexia a thing of the past. Professor Manfred Spitzer.
The aim of our whole research strategy is to use EEG testing to pick up signals in children without them having to listen. They can simply join in the exercise and we will hopefully pick up the signals, even in 3-year-olds. We can then identify warning signs and take appropriate action by the time they are 5 or so. So when the children start school, the anomaly that would develop into dyslexia has already been diagnosed and treated.
Diagnostiziert und auch schon behandelt sind.
A lot can be done for children, but what about older people? They need to retain the capacity to learn in order to cope with life's challenges, especially the ever-changing challenges of the working world. But are their brains up to the task? The answer from scientists is yes. Adults may not learn as fast as children, but they can draw on lots of experiences, and they have plenty of brain cells.
Das, was ich noch gelernt habe,
What I was taught as a medical student, that the brain we are born with has a full complement of nerve cells that gradually and relentlessly diminish, is all wrong. We know today that dying nerve cells are replaced by new cells that are very good at learning. They grow exactly where they are needed, in modules like the hippocampus, which plays a role in short-term memory. New cells growing there enable us to remember things better.
dann kann ich mir natürlich Dinge besser merken.
What is important in youth as well as in old age is practice. Repetition is vital for consolidating links between nerve cells. And even an adult can still learn complex mental and physical skills. The number of points of contact between nerve cells diminishes in the course of our life, but that is not loss, it's selection. The brain has an inexhaustible potential for coordination and interpretation.
Die Einstellung ist wichtig.
Attitude is important. We should tread new ground with interest, not fear.
Oh, das ist ja interessant.
Science promises a rosy future for anyone who is open to new challenges. And this is what the future could look like. The scent of roses hangs in the air around the test object. The smell is supposed to help him learn. Sleep researcher Professor Jan Born explains the theory.
It's not that the smell itself is stimulating. The important thing is that the information we want to absorb, the vocabulary we learn, or the memory game that's played in this experiment, should be coupled with a particular olfactory stimulus, which can then be regenerated during the sleep phase.
Den man dann während des Schlafes erneut vorgibt.
The scent of roses is released at the push of a button and insinuates itself into the nerve cells without waking the sleeping subject. The brain is pretty much at the mercy of this unconscious influence. The results of the study are promising. The kind of scent used is irrelevant. Next day, the scent has a demonstrable effect. Memory becomes child's play, learned while asleep. Learning in our sleep, is that the future?
In
our society, sleep tends to be seen as a kind of luxury downtime, in which nothing actually happens, and which really should be kept to a minimum. We need to convince people that sleep helps improve their performance and increase their creativity. And if people take that on board and act accordingly, I think it's fair to say that sleep will help shape our future.
Im Schlaf liegt zumindest ein Stück weit auch unsere Zukunft.
And it could even be packed into pills. Both scientists and the pharmaceutical industry dream of that. Even though it's hard to imagine at present, the learning pill is expected to hit the market in a matter of years. Professor Manfred Spitzer again.
We'll live with it, just as we live with plastic surgery, with the contraceptive pill and other things that have radically changed our lives. The learning pill will not radically change the world, but it will change it a bit, and we'll certainly learn more than we do now.
Is that the objective? To learn more and achieve more? Only up to a point. The brain is capable of a great deal more than that.